An important thing the student has to realize is that Kundalini energy, the Divine Mother, Tara, is a living, conscious being. Not only is she the real Mother Nature, but she is a Buddha, a goddess. Real gods and goddesses are Buddhas. She's like a person, she's a living being. She has good days and bad days. Seriously. And so the level of help she can provide you in terms of energy levels and circumstances depends on how you think and act on a moment-to-moment basis. I know this from many personal experiences too, not just from theory. I had an insight when I was sleeping one morning, and in my dream I was talking to my mom about whether or not she wanted to move to a new city with me, not realizing that it was actually Tara who I was talking to. And some moments later, my being remarked to me, just as a voice in my head, and said, "Her inspiration to move changes like the wind, according to her mood." And it dawned on me just how much of an influence our thoughts and actions have on her level of strength and will. Because when I was still learning about spirituality, I thought that as long as I conserved my Kundalini and practiced the transmutation exercises like pranayama and such, and took longevity supplements like royal jelly or raw honey, that I would be pretty much guaranteed to raise my Kundalini. But the fact that she is a conscious intelligence, she doesn't respond to all the laws of nature mechanically. So even if you're doing the exercises and things you're supposed to, if she doesn't feel like awakening, she won't. I'll give you another example. I watched a video of Sadhguru explaining in a public lecture all the amazing benefits of honey, and one of them was vitality, so long life. So I went out and bought some honey, and after a few days or weeks of eating it, I inquired about its effect in meditation. And so I asked my Divine Mother, how many years longer can a person live if they eat honey every day? And one of her initial responses was a kind of sour, "Oh, you were expecting it to work, were you?" And then she admitted, "I get something out of it too, but you get daily product." So that goes to show that when it comes to transforming energy, your Kundalini really has the last say. So we need to treat her with a lot of love and respect. The better you take care of her, and the more you work with her, the more willing she will be to assist you. Outside rituals and supplements are just that, just supplements. And what some of these external practices do stimulate, instead, is the downward flow of that energy. It's important to understand that Kundalini can move through the spinal medulla in two opposing directions. Either in a centripetal upward manner toward the brain, which nourishes the brain and the superior manas, the subtle mental body, or centrifugally, downward toward the sexual organs. That's why we experience nocturnal emissions, wet dreams, because our energy tends to move downward and because we have lust. Here are some things to consider when developing brahmacharya or chastity. Most keen students who are aware of this particular force probably want to know how long it takes for that energy to recharge after having an orgasm, because that is the act that releases the most energy in one time. Well, this varies depending on a lot of things, like the level we're working at spiritually and age. I already mentioned that our level of devotion toward her has a great effect on her strength and inspiration. So somebody who is new to the practice of brahmacharya and is really struggling to restrain lust and maintain chastity is usually very quickly and easily forgiven for occasional sexual misconduct than somebody who's taken on the responsibility of chastity and transmutation for a long time. And the consequence is even greater for those who have taken vows of chastity. Master Samael explained that young people easily rejuvenate their energy from the atmosphere and from the sun. Teenagers up until about the age of 15 tend to replenish their energy very quickly, so their daily supply that allows them to function normally returns within a couple days or a week. Young adults from about 21 to 30, before their peak, also tend to have a fairly quick recharge. But my estimate is very speculative and only based on the experience of a Gnostic instructor, some brain statistics done on people who are practicing brahmacharya, and my own personal experience. Many occult magic books that teach you how to manifest things utilizing the orgasm often suggest that you wait at least a week after an emission before you do it again for a magic ritual. But I don't know who originally came up with that rule. My guess is that young adults take about a week or two to replenish their energy to a reasonably high level, and I've also been told by an instructor that adults past their peak and in their middle ages can take about 2 or 3 weeks to rejuvenate, and seniors may take much longer, months or years. Keep in mind that this is all relatively speaking, because a human body, like a newborn that's not yet influenced by culture and the modern lifestyle, has an enormous potential for spiritual development and powers. But because our humanity has the habit of engaging in degenerated activities, our definition of recharging the sexual energy is more in terms of the daily functional energy that we get. This is not to be mistaken for an awakened, fully risen Kundalini. Here's something from Fuel for Spiritual Experience. Kumbhaka is retention of breath. Kumbhaka increases the period of life. It augments the inner spiritual force, vigor, and vitality. If you retain the breath for 1 minute, this 1 minute is added to your lifespan. Yogins, by taking the breath to the Brahmarandra at the top of the head and keeping it there, defeat the Lord of Death, Yama, and conquer death. The length of your life is measured by your heartbeat and the length of your breath. When an animal is sexually excited, it breathes hard and fast because that energy is very active. That's why the more lustful people are, the shorter their lives are. And that's why people age fast in this era. That is why when you go out nowadays, you see people in their 30s and 40s who look like they're in their 60s and 70s. Because they're so saturated in lust, their heart races, their breath races. And we live our lives that way, don't we? Always stressed, always breathing hard, always rushing. Why do so many men experience balding at ages as early as 23? That's why. Now that we are aware of just how essential energy is for our spiritual work, how essential it is to be able to work with the subtle pranic energy in the physical body, here are some things to consider, especially for students who are new to brahmacharya, chastity, and are still learning about its importance, but have not yet practiced it. It's been explained that the human body receives and transforms vital energy on a daily basis, so that we have enough to take on the day and function normally. So when we go to sleep, the physical body rests, while the etheric body replenishes itself by harnessing solar forces. What many beginning students are not aware of, due to the lack of comprehension they receive in the early stages of their work, is just how long Kundalini really takes to recharge. The reality is, I can tell you from my own experience, that a risen Kundalini can take more or less 2 years to rejuvenate, as a single person. Now, I don't know about most other people, but considering the sexual habits of this society, that length of time is probably between 1 and 2 years for adults near their peak, maybe 3 years for middle-aged people, and longer for seniors. This is why we have the tantras more widely available to us in this century, because this gives us the opportunity to awaken Kundalini much faster and generate the energy we need to complete the work. It wasn't like this before the 1950s. The complete teaching is something that we need now more than ever. A personal experience that's relevant to this was when I was meditating on the requirements for liberation, and my Divine Mother told me that it needs to be in a transcendental spiral. And of course, she was referring to herself. So when a couple utilizes the sexual act in an upright way, that temporary flame of illumination that we typically experience on our own becomes a fire. And it burns bright and long like the sun. Learn about your sexual behaviors and work toward reducing and eliminating the ones that you know in your heart are wrong. Every time you commit that act, you deepen your suffering in various ways. Karmically, energetically, of course. So stop. For new students, your first inspiration to develop chastity is knowing in your heart that this is something that you have to do. And don't look back. But on top of this, in order to stop absolutely, we have to comprehend lust in meditation. That's really the only way to completely eliminate a bad habit or defect. Because if that defect is still there, the triggers and temptations will always still be there. Consider your age and how much time you have in this life. Tantra with a partner is not something that most students can start right away. This is because of how difficult and dangerous it can be to try to manage the surplus of energy that you get from it. Maybe you're in your early 30s right now, but you discover in meditation that you have to wait another few years before you're ready to practice Tantra with a spouse. And what about nocturnal emissions? How long is it going to take for you to train your body to stop expelling energy? A few months? A couple of years? So make the commitment to stop lust and the orgasm as soon as you can, and work with the transmutation exercises daily. There are many great exercises that Glorian teaches, particularly pranayama, as well as the ancient Tibetan rites for rejuvenation, which are very potent. And other practices include hatha yoga and runes. And as you do this, continue to develop a close relationship with your Divine Mother. We all have an individual Divine Mother. She is your mother. The best way to show her that you cherish your life and appreciate her help is through continual self-observation and devotion to the exercises. You can tell her that you love her or that you need her, but if you're not doing anything except maybe just studying and reading, then she won't do much for you. You can even meditate on her, and she will appreciate that. Because even though we study Kundalini and the Divine Mother, nature is very complicated and sophisticated, and there are elusive things that she does that you may want to look into and ask her about, such as why she changes her mind about certain situations you're in, or how she negotiates your karma with the law. Because she is your lawyer too. To develop brahmacharya and maintain consistency with it, there are many bad habits that we need to get rid of, and some techniques we can implement. To start off, we have to keep our eyes and our thoughts away from any impressions that are remotely lustful. Master Samael did this by never looking at a woman below the waist. Similarly, this means no pornography, no ogling people with your eyes on the street or in social media, and no lustful fantasizing. Physically speaking, even if you've renounced the orgasm, you really shouldn't be masturbating either. First off, it's extremely easy to give in to the sensations of masturbating or edging with your partner and having an orgasm. Not only that, but any impressions you indulge in will return to you and repeat themselves throughout the day in your mind. You won't see it or notice it usually, but it will happen in your sleep, and these appear in your sleep as thought forms. As we know now, these thought forms steal energy by promoting wet dreams. Now let's go over some tips and habits that we can include in our chastity and transmutation. It's best to keep your phone out of your pocket and in a separate bag. You may not think it makes any difference, but if you've ever felt that slight itching and stinging sensation on your upper thigh where your phone sits in your pocket, that's not the hairs on your leg being irritated. That's your phone's radiation heating up your leg. You can go online and look up videos of people grouping cell phones together in a circle and cooking popcorn kernels by calling the phones. So keeping your phone in your pocket has quite an effect in that area, and that radiation is very bad for your sexual organs. For men, this lowers sperm count. Of course, everything that affects us physically also affects us in the other levels, in the etheric body. Swami Shivananda wrote a book called Health and Diet, which explains all the foods you can eat to promote brahmacharya and the ones you should avoid. Red meat, for example, should be kept at a minimum because studies show that it causes colon cancer. The brahmacharya diet, I believe, doesn't include red meat, but in the traditions of Tantra, they eat red meat because meat and fish and eggs contain the element of fire, and that gives us a lot of energy. We just need to know how to manage it. If you're struggling with nocturnal emissions, you'll want to avoid red meat initially. Stimulants like caffeine technically promote the orgasm because they speed up the nervous system and make the body respond to lust a lot faster. But this is generally not a problem when we're sexually inactive, and usually we can't sleep anyway when we're wired up on coffee. But a shocking thing about caffeine are the detrimental effects it has on the kidneys and the adrenaline glands and stress hormones. If you drink coffee regularly, like every day, please pay attention and consider this. The kidneys and adrenal glands are part of the endocrine system. All the glands that we know of, the thyroid gland, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, etc., are part of the endocrine system. And it is a crucial system that grants us willpower and allows us to have spiritual powers, like clairvoyance. It's very easy to overload the adrenal glands and kidneys by drinking too much coffee every day. This is adrenal fatigue. So if you're tired all the time, and maybe you get lightheaded easily when you stand up, and you become really sluggish and drowsy after eating lunch, like you can barely stay awake after eating a meal, so you go for that second cup of coffee in the afternoon, and then after dinner, you do the same thing and you make some more coffee because you're sleepy again. You have adrenal fatigue. And too much caffeine can even cause type 2 diabetes because of the way it affects blood sugar levels and insulin sensitivity. I never took my caffeine intake that seriously until I had an experience with my Divine Mother. In a dream, I was basically at home, and she said, "Oh, I made you your coffee there." So she took out the canister and poured me a cup and handed it to me. And I asked, "Should I drink it now or later?" And she grinned and said, "Use your will." And then a moment later, I still wasn't sure, so I said, I don't know, should I drink it now or later? And then she explained, "See, that's how terrible your will is." So there is an intimate relationship between the physical endocrine system and the etheric body or kundalini. All of our 7 bodies work together and are interpenetrating. The Divine Mother, our conscience, works through that body of energy. The etheric body is where we get our willpower. If you're a small person, like less than 130 pounds, you should only drink 1 cup of coffee a day. Preferably a dark roast because it's less strong in caffeine. If you're bigger, you can probably handle 2 cups a day. But that should be the maximum. And your intake should be spread out, not all at once. Stay away from those double or triple shot coffee energy drinks that Starbucks has now. When we are taking in energy from food, we help transform that energy by eating mindfully, with self-awareness. You can also pronounce the mantra, Kleem, as you're eating, and this helps bring the Christic or Krishna forces into the body so that it can transform the nutrients. There is also a Eucharist ritual that Glorian Publishing teaches, which helps students get more spiritual and physical nourishment out of their food by blessing it. Honey is an amazing superfood to include in your diet. In Hinduism, honey is a sacred substance with deep symbolism. It is a high-energy food, so brahmacharya guidelines consider it to be the type of food that has stimulating properties. This is something to be aware of if you struggle to control your energy. Nonetheless, there is a lot of prana that honey provides. The Satapatha Brahmana taught that honey was considered the supreme essence of plants, and that by consuming it, one could absorb the essence of the Vedas, the ancient Hindu scriptures. Hinduism also describes honey as a life-sustaining force that derives its power from the sun. I once received a brief insight in the morning before waking up. In my dream, I was listening to a Gnostic lecture, and the instructor said precisely, "Become sleepy. Look for energy. Gather energy." And then I woke up and realized that the astral plane, being another world, of course, must have food and other substances that provide energy. So if you practice dream yoga, or whenever you meditate deep enough to enter the astral plane, you can even gather the sources of prana that are there and transmute them. Ask your Divine Mother what energy sources you should take in, and she will show you. If you're practicing brahmacharya and doing okay with restraining lust during the day, but you're struggling with nocturnal emissions, here are some more tips and tricks. I mentioned pranayama and rites for rejuvenation. Pranayama promotes the flow of prana upward in a centripetal manner, and this prevents the downward flow to the sexual organs. It can be done in the morning and before bed. It can really be done at any time pretty much, and you can do it for as long as you want. Strive for at least 10 minutes a day. And the Tibetan rites for rejuvenation can heal any sick organ or illness. It's always good to keep the body relaxed at all times. It makes a difference. If you spend too many hours being frustrated and brooding, or if you overwork yourself to the point of exhaustion, I'm talking like if you're performing a really monotonous and strenuous task for 3 hours straight or longer, you can frustrate your pranic energy and it will block and cause a nocturnal emission. So don't overwork yourself or become stressed for extended periods of time. An effective remedy that you should definitely take every day is horchata, which is a very popular Latin American drink made of blended melon seeds, from melons like cantaloupe, honeydew, and so forth. The drink recipe video can be found in the playlist Excerpts. Some Gnostics have described the practice of brahmacharya as training the donkey to obey. Lust is like a donkey, a heavy, stubborn animal that needs to be trained. So stay sharp and on the lookout. You never know when lust will appear in your dreams. Train your will to reject lust as soon as you see it. Use your willpower to wake yourself up even the moment you see something lustful. For men, another thing you can do is sleep with your hand by your side. And the next time you feel the sensation of excitement build in your lingam, you can very firmly squeeze the tip of your lingam with your fingers and thumb, or wrap your fingers and thumb around the tip and squeeze that way. Exhaling at the same time will sedate the feeling even more. This can immediately crush the sensation before an orgasm. Mantras that stimulate love or protect the body are also effective. The complete Om mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, is a very good one. The complete Krim Krishnaya mantra is another good one. And some very effective prayers against temptations include Pater Noster and Belilin, all of which can be found on Glorian's website. Mantras and prayers can be used all day long because they train concentration, but in this case, especially when you're falling asleep, and even when you're dreaming. And last, continue to eliminate lust in meditation. This way, you won't have as many triggers lingering in your mind.